Hi everyone, it's Thorn, and in this video I want to talk about lulls in your practice as a witch. My book, The Witch's Path, talks about this pretty at length, but I thought it would be worth putting into a video format. This is something I've been dealing with recently. It's been a really difficult kickoff to the new year for me, and I know this is a difficult time of year just generally for a lot of people. And lulls, stagnation, kind of getting into a rut is something that I think a lot of folks don't talk about. There's some level of shame attached to it, I think, because we have this idea that if we're witches, then like we're witches 24/7 and our whole lives are magical and it's all about integrating magic into your life, and you can't be separated from your practice. And okay, yes, but the reality is that lulls are really normal. If maybe you experience depression just kind of as a matter of like who you are and your personal makeup. Sometimes things happen in our personal lives that kind of knock us off our game. Sometimes, like you just fall into ruts and it's kind of like maybe it's indicative of something being boring and really not working for you anymore and needing change. Sometimes over time, we find that our beliefs have shifted a little bit, and that impacts our practices, maybe the traditions that we've been involved in. Like, as you age, as you learn more, as you have different experiences, and as things happen to you in other realms of your life, it's very normal for your witchcraft to shift. And sometimes those shifts involve pauses and lulls. And those are really normal. And I think they happen to all of us to some degree or another. And I don't think they're indicative that we're doing something wrong necessarily, or that like we're bad witches, or we're, not seeing the magic around us or something. But all of that said, they're normal. Everybody has them sometimes, but they still suck, right? Like they can still feel bad. And I wanted to talk about some practical strategies for working through ruts. I came up with 4 things that I realized that I do myself, and that's what I want to share really quick. So the first thing, and this first thing kind of surprises people, when I'm in a rut, I find that reading lots of books about witchcraft actually isn't super helpful. And it really is certain kinds of witchcraft books that aren't super helpful. It's not very encouraging for me personally to read lots of books about like how to practice witchcraft, particularly from witches who are very similar to myself. So like, like I turn to my shelf and a lot of my books are, it's witchcraft that kind of looks like mine. It's some kind of, flavor of Wicca or like contemporary traditional witchcraft, folklore, like, I don't know, just stuff that's kind of more of what I've always been reading and always been practicing. And the reason it doesn't help is because a lot of the times it's stuff that I know and it's stuff that I want to be doing or stuff that I've done in the past, but it just isn't fueling me now. And sometimes like it makes me feel like I'm doing something wrong or like I'm bad or right. Like this is anxiety brain talking, right? Like everything has to be personal. Because other people who are like me find this thing inspiring, and if I don't, ergo, I must be broken. Like that's kind of the line of thought. And the remedy to that I've found is not necessarily to stop reading, but perhaps to read something that's really just different than you normally would. So maybe something about a completely different branch of magic, or fiction. For me personally, I found that if I want to seek comfort in a book and I want to feel re-inspired about witchcraft, it's very helpful to read fictional stories about witches. Just because, like fictitious witchcraft is appealing for a reason. It's popular for a reason. A lot of people are attracted to witchcraft initially through witches in fiction, and all of that is for a reason. Like it's fun, it's interesting, it's exciting. And I think as a practitioner, you can understand that those things are fictitious. They don't mirror like witchcraft out in the real world, but you can still draw inspiration from them and they can still be comforting. So I do a lot of rereading of stories about witches that have been important to me. In my case, that's a lot of YA. I love Kate Tiernan's Sweep series and Isabel Bird's Circle of Three series. And like these are YA stories written in like the late 90s, early 2000s. like that kind of just gets me charged again, even though like that witchcraft doesn't look like what I'm actually doing. I just find it inspiring. So kind of that first bit of advice is like maybe shift your reading, either set down the witch books entirely or maybe look at an entirely different sort of witchcraft. I recommend like fiction and fantasy. You might read about something that's just completely outside of your wheelhouse, maybe a totally different kind of magic that isn't even witchcraft at all. Something that just forces your brain to shift and think about witchcraft really differently than how you have been practicing it in the past, just as a way of kind of re-inspiring yourself. The second thing that's kind of related to that is to seek out something totally novel and new in terms of what you could be doing or learning. A lot of the times when we fall into a rut, it's because we've become bored along the way and we haven't really noticed. And sometimes the remedy to that is just to try something completely different. And this could look like, it could look like signing up for a class in something that you've never studied before, maybe reading a book in something you've never studied before, going to maybe a public ritual held by a group that you don't know anything about, in a tradition that you don't know anything about, seeking out a new experience, maybe picking a totally new divination tool. It could be something really simple, but finding a way to introduce something totally novel into your practice with the full understanding that you might not like it, and it's okay if you don't. You might decide that it's not for you and set it down later. You might be bad at it. Like that's all of that stuff is okay. It's kind of like cross training in like athletics. Like sometimes if you're focusing so heavily on your sport, your thing, you can kind of kickstart things in a different direction by trying something else, maybe a complementary physical activity, right? So it kind of works the same way in witchcraft and magic. Like if you find yourself in a rut, if you find yourself bored, shift out of it and do something completely different, even if it's just for a little while. That's something that I've done. Another thing that's related to that, introducing newness, right? Like this third thing. Everything that I've said so far is about trying something new. This third thing is seeking out new people, new communities. Maybe that means refreshing your social media feed so that you're following completely different people. It could be something really simple and low impact like that. Maybe joining a new internet platform or community on a familiar platform. If you're blessed to have access to physical communities, maybe it means seeking them out, going to a local moot or a pagan night out or something. Obviously with COVID, like we have to keep certain precautions in place, so you be the judge as far as your safety. But seek out new people, because just like with books and activities, people are going to have their own ideas and perspectives and knowledge that is going to necessarily shift how you are thinking and behaving in witchcraft spaces. Yeah, just introducing as much novelty as possible. And while you're doing it, it could feel kind of superficial, right? Like giving a child like a different toy because they're bored with their old toy. But remember that these are strategies for jump-starting something. You're not necessarily trying to revolutionize your whole life over here. You're just trying to re-inspire yourself. And sometimes it doesn't take that much. It could be meeting a new person, joining a Discord server for the first time, following totally different people on YouTube or Instagram, meeting somebody new in the community, going to an open ritual or something that you'd never thought about doing before, reading in a completely different genre of book. Like those things are potentially really superficial, but that's okay, right? Anything that kicks you out of that rut is useful. The fourth thing that works for me personally is to shift and kind of set things down in my regular practice. Like if I have a really like kind of elaborate personal practice with like, you know, coven meetings and marking the moon and, you know, the wheel of the year and like whatever, like however elaborate or simple your practice is, figuring out like which of those things are actually core and kind of setting down the rest for a time. Because sometimes we fall into ruts because we're actually like overwhelmed or exhausted or just sort of burned out. And I found that a way to deal with that is to cut out the stuff Not because it's extraneous. I'm not saying that things are unnecessary, but sometimes when we don't have the energy for all of it, it's helpful to shift the focus to the things that actually matter the most. In my case, personally, a lot of the time that's very simple things like meditation, prayer, it might be divination. Like find one or two, and really like no more than one or two things that you can do really consistently that fuel your practice but don't push you beyond it at this point, right? This is particularly for folks who are dealing with burnout and overwhelm and exhaustion. Again, sometimes ruts are like they happen to us because other things in our life just feel out of control. And when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I can keep myself grounded, feel like I'm still maintaining a practice, feel like I'm still connected by doing really simple things like meditating in the morning for 10 minutes, or like still maintaining a regular tarot practice. Things, whatever it is to you that feels low impact that you can do. Maybe it's a particular prayer that you say regularly if you work with a deity. Like that, this is going to be really personalized, but it's helpful to sit back and think like, okay, in my practice of witchcraft, whatever that is, what are some of the core practices? What can I strip back for now? And then as you're feeling better, you add in those other things that you're used to doing or that maybe you haven't done but you want to be doing. Add those things in gradually. Again, like a workout routine. Like if you injure yourself and you need to rest for a while, it doesn't make sense to sign up for a marathon, right? Instead, you set small goals, you add things back into your training as you get stronger. And I think witchcraft can work very similarly. So ask yourself, what can I strip away? And then how can I add things back gradually? But for right now, as I give myself a break, as I recover, what things will help to kind of keep me going without taxing me too much? So there you have it. I hope that was helpful. I am having a good makeup day, so I felt like I needed to make a video. But I hope you all are well, and I will see you next time.